Hello, and welcome to the Winter Solstice and Yuletide Storytelling Hour. My name is Cynthia Klatte of Clan Cunningham, and I will be your bard today. These are not my stories, but are stories from both pre-Christian Europe about the winter solstice and more modern Christmas tales that are infused with pre-Christian elements. The first two come from The Return of the Light, 12 Tales from Around the World by Carolyn Vicker Edwards. Fantastic book. And for our first tale, which comes from my ancient ancestors in the North, the Norse, is titled Loki and the Death of Light. And it comes from the Prose Edda, which was penned by Snorri Sturluson around the 13th century. And by the way, the term Yule comes from Old Norse Yule, which was an ancient midwinter festival. The air was sweet in the upper world, home of the wind. The swamp wolf was caged. The eagle atop the world tree slumbered. The great serpent dozed at its roots. The watchman at the rainbow bridge relaxed in the midst of sounds of teasing, laughter, and waterfalls. Green vines entwined the great hall of the goddesses with the great hall of the gods. The rainbow bridge shimmered. The giants were far away, and the deities, every one of them, were safe. Loki, that fire-haired pretzel of an athlete, neither god nor giant, somersaulted to cover up his envy. He landed on his feet, but his heart felt upside down. Balder again. Every single god and goddess loving that pretty boy, Balder, who was never anything but good, kind, and fair. Every answer of his just right. Perfect. That's what Balder was, and adored for it. This very moment the deities encircled Balder, god of light, who stood, head thrown back, radiant, arms outstretched. They were pelting him with every sort of object, each of which fell away from his body, harmless as a snowflake. On and on the deities played this strange game in self-satisfied, jubilant relief. Just weeks before, Balder the Glorious One had dreamed over and over that he would die. It's about time, Loki had thought privately, but he'd said nothing. Balder's parents, Loki's foster brother, the great magician Odin, and Odin's wife Frigg, the fate knower, had gripped each other anxiously, then called all the deities together. Thor had come, strutting around, swinging his irritatingly accurate hammer. Bragi had begun to froth his endless poetry. Frey with his harvest of hair, and Freya with her cat-drawn chariot, had brooded together, while blind Hod, god of night, Balder's shy brother, had tried clumsily to comfort Nanna, Balder's wife, who rocked, weeping in a corner. The lot of them had been shocked, mournful, then buzzing with counsel. What could be done to prevent the death of their beloved Balder, son of light? He simply must not die, they shouted. He cannot, they roared. We will not let him. They devised a plan. Frigg would ask every single being in all 9 worlds, living and non-living, to refrain from hurting her precious child. Loki had turned himself into a fly on the wall and watched while Frigg, glowing with zeal, had cloaked herself for departure. Frigg asked water, air, fire, and metal, each in all its forms, not to hurt Balder. Beasts, birds, rocks, snakes, disease, each one had assured her, she reported when she returned, that they would never ever bring harm to Balder, god of light. So now, giddily, smugly, the lot of them mocked fate, making of Balder a target because he couldn't be wounded. Peeling stones and golden knights and pawns of their great chess set, even arrows made no difference. Balder's beatific participation irritated Loki all the more. Loki changed his shape. He became an old woman. He knew Frigg would mistrust him if he went to her in his own form. Frigg was spinning when the crone hobbled up to her. "Your Balder is in peril," wavered the crone. Frigg looked up frightened. "They're throwing things at him," croaked the old woman. "Oh, of course," smiled Frigg, relieved. "They're playing a game with him, but he can't be hurt. I've asked every bee in the 9 worlds not to hurt him." "Really?" the crone marveled. "You talked to every single one?" A flicker of annoyance passed over Frigg's face. "Well, yes. Everyone that counts. I didn't bother with the mistletoe. It's so small and weak, it couldn't possibly make a difference." The old woman clucked and moved slowly away. Out of sight of the goddess, Loki leapt out of the old woman's shape and into his own. Snip, snap! He's reached an oak and plucked the mistletoe there, crooning a little song of triumph. "Too small and weak, are you, my little friend? We'll see about that." Loki carved a point on the mistletoe's thickest twig. It was soft, but Loki knew it wouldn't matter. Strange, pale weapon in his hand, he slunk back to the deity's great silly game. He found blind Hod, god of night, wistful as usual, standing at the sidelines. "Why don't you play?" asked Loki, putting his hand on Hod's shoulder. "I've nothing to throw, and I can't even see him." Loki gave an encouraging snort. "Ah, you can do it. Let me help." Into Hod's hand he placed the dart. Then, using his own body as a lever, he guided Hod's shot. The mistletoe whistled through the air and landed its point directly into Baldur's heart. The beautiful god sank instantly to his knees and then fell face down into the ground. The boisterous merrymaking fell deathly silent. Stunned, the gods and goddesses could not move at first. Then Nanna screamed, "My husband!" Loki watched them, his heart gloating, but his mind unquiet. There was nothing to be done. Balder, god of light, was dead. Hell, and the world of the mists and the dead, would be keeping a place for him. All the inhabitants of the 9 worlds, the elves, dwarves, the mountain giants, frost giants, and the Valkyries, paraded in the great funeral procession. Moving as if made of lead, the gods and goddesses fashioned for their beloved an enormous boat. When they placed his still form on its planks, Nanna's heart burst within her. Balder's wife, then, they had to lay beside him. So despairingly weak were the deities in their sorrow that they needed a giantess to push the boat into the sea. The orange of the funeral pyre lit the ocean with an angry, mournful light. "Who will win my undying love?" whispered Frigg. "Who will bring my son and his wife back from Hell's underworld?" On Odin's 8-legged stallion, Hermod the Bold galloped into Hell's underworld. A giantess stopped him. "What are you doing here? Your skin has too much color for death." "Have Balder and Nanna passed this way?" asked Hermod. "I've come for them." "Yes, it's 3 days now. They're in Hell's Hall." The ghosts of Balder and Nanna smiled wanly at Hermod. They gave him gifts for Frigg and Odin. Hermod begged Hel to let them return. "The whole world mourns. Nothing grows. There is neither warmth nor light. The hearts of humans and gods are dim with tears." Interest reddened Hel's shadowed sockets. "Are their eyes too dim with tears?" Hermod assured her that it was so. "Then so be it," said Hel, her great teeth showing. "If everyone and everything on earth will weep for these 2, they may return." The ghosts of Balder and Nanna stirred hopefully. "But if even one does not shed tears, they stay." Hermod raced back with his wonderful news. Everything and everyone wept. The mistletoe especially cried for its terrible part in the death of Balder. Ever after, the mistletoe carried the pearl-like berries of its tears. But Loki, he alone, strained against his ordinary shape and took the shape of a giantess. "I do not weep," sulked Loki from inside his disguise. "He never wept for me, and I do not weep for him." And so it was that Loki's dry eyes kept Balder in the world of the dead. The gods and goddesses, enraged, caught Loki. He changed himself to a salmon this time and hidden in a pool at the side of the house with the 4 doors, north, south, east, and west. Odin caught him in a net and squeezed him tightly, that he wouldn't wriggle away. Ever after the body of the salmon slims toward the tail where Odin once grabbed. The deities chained Loki to a rock. They hung a poisonous snake above him to drip venom in his face. Loki's wife, ever faithful, stood catching the poison in a bowl as it fell. But each time she left to empty the bowl, the venom fell into Loki's face. The earth trembled and shook, then with Loki's agony. Balder did return, but not until Loki had broken free of his fetters and loosed the swamp wolf from his prison. The great serpent at the bottom of the world tree uncoiled. The watchman at the rainbow bridge blasted his trumpet when he saw them coming. The eagle atop the world tree awoke and screamed in terror. The swamp wolf swallowed Odin. The great serpent writhed and spit flames and engulfed all of the 9 worlds. In the last burst of power, the sun gave birth to a daughter even more beautiful than she. Then finally onto the ashes came Balder, god of light, free of the underworld, clinging tenderly to the arms of his Nana. And then the only 2 humans left in the middle world, the 2 who had hidden themselves away, came out into the new light. Their names were Life and Stubborn Will to Live. The gods and goddesses then, the ones who were left, gathered together on the sunlit plains of the upper world, home of the wind. Shyly, joyfully, they clung to the returning couple, even as Life and Stubborn Will to Live had clung to each other in the middle world. The gods and goddesses sifted through the wreckage of their great hall. In the ruins, they found the golden chess pieces with which they had once amused themselves. Slowly, slowly, they began to play again. The next story is from Italy, entitled La Befana and the Royal Child of Light. Now, Befana is a strega, an Italian witch, and it's thought that she might have originated from the tales of a Roman goddess named Strania, the goddess of the New Year, who brought gifts, as her presents were of the same description as those of the Befana. La Befana is a tall old woman with a red shawl and a bent branch broom that goes sweep, swept, sweep. She lives in a thin wooden house with a round-topped door in the shadows of a dark purple mulberry trees. La Befana sweeps the mulberry leaves, swept, swept, sweep, into piles, crunch, crackle, crunch. La Befana has a long nose and a hump on her back. Her hands are speckled with pale chocolate. She pins the white billows of her hair with bone combs. Befana's kitchen shelves are libraries of jars and tins. Honey, almonds, hazelnuts, and the skins of lemons and tangerines. Cloves, vanilla beans, and cinnamon. Hills of sugar and silky flowers, with chipped china teacups for scoops. Up until the winter of our story, La Befana had swept and baked for no one but herself. Sweep, swept, sweep, went her broom, year after day, day after year. Spicy, doughy smells curled out of her windows as she baked. Beat, bet, beat, knead, nod, knead, went her hands. Clack, drack, clack, went the sticks for her stove. La Befana never spoke. People heard her noises, but they never heard her voice. At least people could not remember the last time they had. But one year in wintertime, when the leaves dried in yellow-brown piles, Befana had a conversation. Everyone heard her, and then La Befana's story changed forever. One fine morning, a strange parade marched down the mulberry street. Everyone watched, shouting and crowding at the edges of the procession. La Befana stayed inside, but she parted her curtains and stared. She saw enormous, clopping brown beasts with knobbed knees and bumps on their backs. Cases carved with suns and crescents thumped the sides of the brown giants with each huge mincing step they took. Jewel-colored flags. Old man in red turban at the front, a younger, head in a pillow of purple in the middle, and a third, robes green as orange tree leaves at the rear. A boy jigging to the song of a stringed box, another shaking a belled stick with red ribbons. Befana's breath frosted her window. She rubbed it clear with her fingers. At that moment, everyone saw it. A child sprinted out of the throng, straight to Befana's door. He hopped from foot to foot there, knocking, knock, 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 at her door. La Befana cracked the door, then opened it wide enough to show herself, her hand clutched around her bent branch broom. The music stopped. The parade paused. It was as if even the strangers knew that La Befana needed silence to try out her words. Everyone saw the little boy reach for the hand that held the broom. People saw La Befana's hand tighten on the old bent branch, but she gave him her other hand, closing his little one in her own. People puffed with breath they did not let out. The child spoke first. "We're looking for the child of light, Nona. We're looking for the royal child who will light up the world." People's breath went out and in. "Eh?" said La Befana. "We're looking for the child of light, Nona. Come with us. We're bringing the royal child our gifts." La Befana was silent. "Come, Nona," said the boy. And then La Befana spoke, voice husky with years of no use. "I have my sweeping," she said. "Come," said the boy. "I have my baking child," said La Befana. "I have to gather the wood." And then the boy wrapped his arms round her gray skirts and clung. Everyone watched La Befana set away her broom. La Befana rested both old hands on the child's small back. Then somewhere in the clear air, the music started again. Like dancers, the people and the animals in the parade pivoted, began to jostle, to call out to one another. The boy unstuck himself and plunged away. La Befana stood for moments before she clenched her broom and shut her door hard. If you had been listening at her door, you would have heard the sounds again of that bent branch broom. Sweep, sweep, sweep. Sweep, sweep, sweep. But the sound would have smudged a little. Sweep, sweep, sweep. Sweep, sweep. As if La Befana were leaning and thinking. If you had peeked in the window, you could have seen her dreaming there, leaning on the broom, her eyes like chocolate melting. Tiny images of La Befana mirrored again and again in the library of kitchen jars, now very still. Then suddenly La Befana and all the mirrored La Befanas began to move, and all around the kitchen moved too. Lids clattering from tins, the rolling pin dancing, eggs bursting themselves in red and green bowls. Beat, bet, beat, knead, not knead. Cloves and cinnamon swirling through the air. Rinds of lemons and oranges scattering like commas and parentheses onto pages of rolled out flour. Vanilla beans shivering in snowy sugar. Almonds and hazelnuts cavorting in honey. Cream frothing. Chocolate slivers spinning from the backs of La Befana's hands, drifting onto balls, twists, and mezzaluna rolls of cookies and cakes, the hot oven mouth closing on them all. Then in a careen of perfume, La Befana packed a basket, layer after layer, li-lo-li, of cookies, cakes, and candies. Then, are you watching? La Befana smoothing her hair and pinching her combs tight, pinning her red shawl at her throat, resting her fingers on her eyes, and finally taking up the basket and opening her door. La Befana had her gifts for the royal child, but it is twilight now, and a red ribbon on the street is all that is left of the parade. Can La Befana catch up? A mulberry leaf settles like a crown at her feet. La Befana disappears and returns with her broom. She begins to run. The basket bounces at her side. She wheezes. She runs, and then suddenly a gust catches her. The broom tilts and lifts. La Befana flies away high into the stars. La Befana is a tall old woman with a bent branch broom that goes sweep, sweep, sweep. She lives in the shadow of the mulberry trees, and she bakes and gathers wood and talks not much at all. But ever since that winter, La Befana packs every year a basket of gifts, cookies, cakes, and candies for the royal child of light. La Befana never catches up to the parade, but she flies each year across the sky, stopping at every house below. She is looking for the child who will light up the world. La Befana is never sure what the child may look like, so she leaves her gifts at every home in case the girl or the boy within is the royal child of light. I really appreciate that she is has an open mind and is willing to consider that that royal child may be a she. For our next story, we have Hans Christian Andersen's The Fir Tree, which is a tale told by a young fir tree in the forest, which I hope will increase your empathy for Mother Earth and all her children. In ancient times, before people built cities and moved away from the forests, people were more in tune with the cycles of nature and lived more in harmony with the rest of creation. And trees were held sacred by some cultures. The fir tree. Far down in the forest, where the warm sun and the fresh air made a sweet resting place, grew a pretty little fir tree. And yet it was not happy. It wished so much to be tall like its companions, the pines and firs which grew around it. The sun shone, the soft air fluttered its leaves, and the little peasant children passed by, prattling merrily, but the fir tree heeded them not. Sometimes the children would bring a large basket of raspberries or strawberries wreathed on a straw, and seat themselves near the fir tree and say, "Is this not a pretty little tree?" which made it feel more unhappy than before. And yet all this while the tree grew a notch or joint taller every year, for by the number of joints in the stem of a fir tree we can discover its age. Still as it grew it complained, "Oh, how I wish I were as tall as the other trees! Then I would spread out my branches on every side, and my top would overlook the wide world. I should have the birds building their nests on my boughs, and when the wind blew I should bow with stately dignity like my tall companions." The tree was so discontented that it took no pleasure in the warm sunshine, the birds, or the rosy clouds that floated over it morning and evening. Sometimes in winter, when the snow lay white and glittering on the ground, a hare would come springing along and would jump right over the little tree, and then how mortified it would feel. 2 winters passed, and when the third arrived, the tree had grown so tall that the hare was obliged to run round it. Yet it remained dissatisfied and would exclaim, "Oh, if I could but keep on growing tall and old! There's nothing else worth caring for in the world." In the autumn, as usual, the woodcutters came and cut down several of the tallest trees, and the young fir tree, which was not grown to its full height, shuddered as the neighbor trees fell to the earth with a crash. After the branches were lopped off, the trunks looked so slender and bare that they could scarcely be recognized. Then they were placed upon wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. Where were they going? What would become of them? The young fir tree wished very much to know. So in the spring, when the swallows and the storks came, it asked, "Do you know where those trees were taken? Did you meet them?" The swallows knew nothing, but the stork, after a little reflection, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I think I do. I met several ships when I flew from Egypt, and they had masts that smelt like fur. I think these must have been the trees. I assure you they were stately, very stately." "Oh, how I wish I were tall enough to go on the sea," said the fir tree. "What is this sea, and what is it like?" "It would take too much time to explain," said the stork, flying quickly away. "Rejoice in thy youth," said the sunbeam. "Rejoice in thy fresh growth and the young life that is in thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew watered it with tears, but the fir tree regarded them not. Christmas drew near, and many young trees were cut down, some even smaller and younger than the fir tree, who enjoyed neither rest nor peace from longing to leave its forest home. These young trees, chosen for their beauty, kept their branches, but they too were laid on wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. "Where are they going?" asked the fir tree. "They are no taller than I. Indeed, one is much shorter. And why are the branches not cut off? Where are they going?" We know," sang the sparrows. "We have looked in the windows of the houses in town, and we know what is done with them. They are dressed up in the most splendid manner. We have seen them standing in the middle of a warm room and adorned with all sorts of beautiful things. Honey cakes, gilded apples, playthings, and many hundreds of wax tapers." "And then?" asked the fir tree, trembling through all its branches. "And then what happens?" "We did not see any more," said the sparrows, "but that was enough for us." "I wonder whether anything so brilliant will ever happen to me," thought the fir tree. "It would be much better than crossing the sea. I long for it almost with pain. Oh, when will Christmas be here? I am now as tall and well grown as those which were taken last year. Oh, that I were laid on the wagon, or standing in the warm room, with all that brightness and splendor around me. Something better and more beautiful is to come after, or the trees would not be so decked out. Yes, what follows will be grander and more splendid. What can it be? I am weary with longing. I scarcely know how I feel." "Rejoice with us," said the air and the sunlight. "Enjoy thine own bright life with the fresh air." But the tree would not rejoice, though it grew taller every day. In winter and summer its dark green foliage might be seen in the forest, while passers-by would say, "What a beautiful tree." A short time before Christmas, the discontented fir tree was the first to fall. As the axe cut through the stem and divided the pith, the tree fell with a groan to the earth, conscious of pain and faintness, and forgetting all its anticipation of happiness and sorrow at leaving its home in the forest. It knew that it should never again see its dear old companions, the trees, nor the little bushes and many-colored flowers that had grown by its side. Perhaps not even the birds. Neither was the journey at all pleasant. The tree first recovered itself while being unpacked with several other trees in the courtyard of a house, and it heard a man say, "We want only one, and this is the prettiest." Then came two servants with grand livery and carried the fir tree into a large and beautiful apartment. On the walls hung pictures. Near the great stove stood great china vases with lions on the lids. There were rocking chairs, silken sofas, and large tables covered with pictures, books, and playthings worth a great deal of money. At least the children said so. Then the fir tree was placed in a large tub full of sand, but green baize hung all around it so that no one could see it was a tub, and it stood on a very handsome carpet. How the fir tree trembled! What is going to happen to me now? Some young ladies came, and the servants helped them to adorn the tree. On one branch they hung little bags cut out of colored paper, and each bag was filled with sweetmeats. From other branches hung gilded apples and walnuts, as if they had grown there. And above and all around were hundreds of red, blue, and white tapers, which were fastened on the branches. Dolls, exactly like real babies, were placed under the green leaves. The tree had never seen such things before. And at the very top was fastened a glittering star made of tinsel. Oh, it was very beautiful. This evening they all exclaimed, "How bright it will be!" "Oh, that the evening were here," thought the tree, "and the tapers lighted. Then I shall know what else is going to happen. Will the trees of the forest come to see me? I wonder if the sparrows will peep in at the windows as they fly. Shall I grow faster here and keep on all these ornaments during spring and winter?" But guessing was of very little use. It made his bark ache, and this pain is as bad for a slender fir tree as a headache is for us. At last the tapers were lighted, and then what a glistening blaze of light the tree presented. It trembled so with joy, and all its branches, that one of the candles fell among the green leaves and burnt some of them. "Help! Help!" exclaimed the young ladies, but there was no danger, for they quickly extinguished the fire. After all, this tree tried not to tremble at all, though the fire frightened him. He was so anxious not to hurt any of the beautiful ornaments, even while their brilliancy dazzled him. And now the folding doors were thrown open, and a troop of children rushed in, as if they intended to upset the tree. They were followed more slowly by their elders. For a moment the little ones stood silent with astonishment, and then they shouted for joy till the room rang, and they danced merrily round the tree, while one present after another was taken from it. "What are they doing? What will happen next?" thought the fir. At last the candles burned down to the branches and were put out. Then the children received permission to plunder the tree. Oh, how they rushed upon it till the branches cracked, and had it not been fastened with a glittering star to the ceiling, it must have been thrown down. The children then danced about with their pretty toys, and no one noticed the tree except the children's maid, who came and peeped among the branches to see if an apple or a fig had been forgotten. "A story, a story!" cried the children, pulling a little fat man toward the tree. "Now we shall be in the green shade," said the man as he seated himself under it, "and the tree will have the pleasure of hearing also. But I shall only relate one story." "What shall it be? Ivede Avede or Humpty Dumpty?" The fir tree remained quite still and thought to himself, "Shall I have anything to do with this?" But he had already amused them as much as they wished. Then the old man told them the story of Humpty Dumpty, how he fell downstairs and was raised up again and married a princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, "Tell another, tell another." After this the fir tree became silent and thoughtful. Never had the birds in the forest told such tales as Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs and yet married a princess. "Ah, yes, so this happens in the world," thought the fir tree. He believed it all, because it was related by such a nice man. "Ah, well," he thought, "who knows? Perhaps I may fall down too and marry a princess." And he looked joyfully He looked forward joyfully to the next evening, expecting to be again decked out with lights and playthings, golden fruit. Tomorrow I will not tremble, thought he. I will enjoy all my splendor, and I shall hear the story of Humpty Dumpty again, perhaps a feed. And the tree remained quiet and thoughtful all night. In the morning the servants and the housemaids came in. Now, thought the fir, all my splendor is going to begin again. But they dragged him out of the room and upstairs to the garret and threw him on the floor in a dark corner where no daylight shone, and there they left him. What does this mean, thought the tree. What am I to do here? I can hear nothing in a place like this. And he leaned against the wall and thought and thought. He had time enough to think, for days and nights passed and no one came near him. And when at last somebody did come, it was only to put away large boxes in a corner. So the tree was completely hidden from sight, as if it had never existed. It is winter now, thought the tree. The ground is hard and covered with snow, so that people cannot plant me. I shall be sheltered here, I dare say, until spring comes. How thoughtful and kind everybody is to me. Still, I wish this place were not so dark, as well as lonely, with not even a little hare to look at. How pleasant it was out in the forest, when the snow lay on the ground. Then the hare would run by, yes, and jump over me too, although I did not like it then. Oh, it is terribly lonely here. I shall consider myself happy when someone comes to take me out of this place. But would this ever happen? Yes, one morning people came to clear out the garret. The boxes were packed away and the tree was pulled out of the corner and thrown roughly on the garret floor. Then the servant dragged it out upon the staircase where the daylight shone. Now life is beginning again, said the tree, rejoicing in the sunshine and fresh air. Then it was carried downstairs and taken into the courtyard so quickly that it forgot to think of itself and could only look about. There was so much to be seen. The court was close to a garden where everything looked blooming. Fresh and fragrant roses hung over the little palings. The linden trees were in blossom, while the swallows flew here and there, crying, "Twit, twit, twit." Now I shall live, cried the tree, joyfully spreading out its branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow, and it lay in the corner amongst weeds and nettles. The star of gold paper still stuck in the top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the same courtyard were playing two of the merry children who had danced round the tree at Christmas and had been so happy. The youngest saw the gilded star and ran and pulled it off the tree. "Look what is sticking to that old ugly fir tree," said the child, treading on the branches till they cracked under his boots. And the tree saw all the fresh, bright flowers in the garden, and looked at itself and wished it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It thought of its fresh youth in the forest, and of the merry Christmas evening, having listened to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "Past, past," said the old tree. "Oh, had I but enjoyed myself when I could have done so. Now it is too late." When a lad came and chopped the tree into small pieces till a large bundle lay in a heap on the ground. The pieces were placed in a fire under the kettle, and they quickly blazed up brightly, while the tree sighed so deeply that each sigh was like a little pistol shot. Then the children who were at play came and seated themselves in front of the fire and looked at it and cried, "Pop, pop." But at each pop, which was a deep sigh, the tree was thinking of a summer day in the forest, or of some winter night there when the stars shone brightly, and of Christmas evening, and of Humpty Dumpty, the only story it had ever heard or knew how to relate, till at last it was consumed. The boys still played in the garden, and the youngest wore on his breast the golden star with which the tree had been adorned during the happiest evening of its existence. Now all was past. The tree's life was past, and the story also, for all stories must come to an end at last. The next tale is from another land very far back in my ancestry, which is Iceland. Icelandic folklore is chock full of trolls. Did you know that in Iceland there are numerous place names connected to trolls? There's Trolls Land, Trolls Trail, Trolls Ridge, Trolls Heath, Trolls Forest. There's the Troll Shield Mountain, Trolls Waterfall, and Iceland even has a troll peninsula. They even named some plants and moss after trolls in Iceland. And this tale is called The Yule Lads, Iceland's Jólasveinir by Heidi Hermann. And the mother of the Yule Lads, Grilla, first appeared in written text also in the Edda by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. But her 13 sons are part of this Christmas tale. Here's the cover. In Iceland, a very old legend is shared at Christmas time about a nasty ogre troll named Grilla. Mean-tempered and cold-hearted, Grilla was feared across the land. She would sneak down into the villages to steal lazy and naughty children away and hide them in mountain caves where she turned them into bad kids' stew. She had help from her Yule cat named Jólakötturinn, the Yule cat, 13 of her many troll children. The 13 boys became known as Jólasveinir, the Yule lads, because they would come down from the mountain every year around Christmas. So of course, children in Iceland made sure to be extra good and helpful at Christmas time so that Grilla and the Yule lads wouldn't get them for misbehaving. The trolls started arriving in the middle of December until by Christmas Eve all 13 were together. But then suddenly, one year, something changed. The Yule lads stopped helping Grilla and weren't as mean or scary. They became just a little nicer, still playing pranks and causing mischief, but no longer stealing away bad children. On an ordinary day, in an ordinary year, something unusual happened. There had been trolls in Iceland since the time of settlement. Some are mean and nasty, and some are shy, but all are magical creatures who live for a very long time. There are 13 of these trolls who are brothers and are very special. Their mother is a terrible ogre, Grilla, who likes to make mean kids stew out of children who misbehave. Because they visit the villages near Christmas time, these 13 trolls became known as the Yule lads. The Yule lads loved being in the village during the holidays. It was a perfect time for the Yule lads to swipe food and other goodies, play pranks on the unsuspecting townsfolk, and generally create havoc. They weren't very nice, but none were as mean and wicked as their mother. They were selfish, sneaky, and didn't care about the feelings of other people. It was the 12th day of December, and like every year, Stekjester, whose English name is Sheepcote-Clod, was making his way down to the local village. As he spotted the sheep in the valley below, he smiled. He checked first to make sure everyone in the village was busy and wouldn't notice him sneaking around. Sheepcote-Clod got his name because he loved fresh sheep's milk, and he carried a sack packed with big steins to fill with the milk. An expert sheep stealer, he would creep up on the sheep grazing in the pasture and steal a mug's worth of milk whenever he could. Although he had stiff legs and often clomped noisily in the fields where the sheep grazed, he could sneak up quietly. From the village he made his way to the pasture, where he promptly snuck up on a mama sheep. Startled, a small lamb jumped up and ran crying from the stiff-legged troll. Across the field the shepherd's son looked up to see the tiny lamb scamper to the top of a large pile of rocks. Realizing it was too high up to jump down, the lamb became very afraid and cried louder. The shepherd boy's son rushed to help, running so fast that one of his shoes flew off. Hiding, Sheepcoat Claude watched as the boy jumped onto the rock and picked up the lamb. Holding it close to his chest, he kept it safe as they slid down the rock. When he released it, the lamb scampered back to its mother. Sheepcoat Claude saw the boy limp away, looking around for his missing shoe. It lay on a nearby rock. The boy sat down next to the rock, but instead of sliding the shoe on, the boy steadied his foot. Sheepcoat Claude crept closer and saw that the boy had cut his heel. He leaned too close and knocked the shoe from the rocks without thinking. He tried to grab it before it fell. When the boy looked up, he was staring Sheepcoat Claude right in the face. This had never happened before, getting caught by a human. How embarrassing. There was no question in the boy's mind that what he was looking at was a troll. Sheepcoat Claude was short, not even as tall as the boy, and his face was wrinkled like an old man's. His beady eyes were bright and very blue, and his ears were long and skinny, a little pointed and bent over at the top, like all trolls' ears. His long, thin face had a sharp, crooked nose, a pointy little chin, and scraggly mustache and whiskers, and big, bushy white eyebrows. The boy thought the troll looked like a little like a mountain goat. Just then the shepherd called to his son, and the boy turned to look, and when he turned back, the troll was gone. Sheepcoat Claude watched the boy limp away. This is a problem, he thought. Humans weren't supposed to see trolls. Trolls were the stuff of fairy tales and scary stories to tell all night around the fire. Everyone in Iceland knew of the Yule lads. They were famous for pranks, like all good trolls, were scary enough that humans were afraid of them. But until now they'd never been seen. Although most trolls turned to stone if they were caught in sunlight, the Yule lads had an ogre for a mother, so they were only half troll and could sneak around in the sun. If people knew they could be seen and maybe caught, would that be the end of their freedom? Would there be humans traipsing around the mountain looking for them? Their home cave would be invaded and their treasures stolen. No, this is not good at all. He paced back and forth with a wearied look on his craggy troll face. There was another choice. He'd have to sneak down to the little boy's house and steal him away. He'd lock him up in a dungeon of the troll caves, where the boy could never tell his story to anyone again. Satisfied, he sneered and snuck across the field, hiding behind the sheep as he followed the boy and his father to their home. He talked excitedly about how the little lamb had run onto the rock and gotten stuck, and he looked proud when he got to the part where he saved the lamb and protected the flock. But he said nothing about seeing a troll. He hadn't told the biggest secret he'd surely ever know. And he didn't even tell his father about his injured foot. Frowning, Sheepcoat Claude watched them walk over the hill, and as the shepherd put an arm around his son's shoulder, he could feel a strange little lump in the back of his throat. What was that water in his eye? That night he rested after his busy day's work. Every one of his steins and flasks was bursting with sweet sheep's milk, and his stomach was filled with as much as he could drink. As he looked up to the stars, he thought about the boy and felt just a little bit bad. Sheepcoat Claude had been clumsy. And because the boy hadn't told his father, Sheepcoat Claude had been able to spend the entire day chasing sheep, one of his favorite things to do. If the little boy had told his father, Sheepcoat Claude would have wasted the whole day waiting to steal the little boy. And he would have lost the entire Christmas season dragging him up the mountain to the home cave. He tapped his pointy chin thoughtfully. For a human, that little boy isn't half bad, he thought, pulling at the tufts of wool stuck between the rocks beside him. As sheep would wander all over the mountains, bits of their woolly coats would become caught in the rocks, and Sheepcoat Claude would collect the wool in his pockets as he stalked the herds to steal their milk. Looking at the tuft in his hand, he had an idea. He would give the boy a gift. Not to say thank you, of course, and certainly not because he was grateful. He was, after all, a half-ogre troll, and being pleasant just wasn't in his nature. But a small gift would be okay. All night long, Sheepcoat Claude cleaned and combed and pieced together his bits of wool, working and twisting them with his gnarled but talented hands. When he was done, it was still dark, and he snuck down to the little boy's house and found the window to his room. The boy's shoes were neatly tucked under the window sill within easy reach, and Sheepcoat Claude opened the window and jumped inside. Sitting on a stool, he snatched up the boy's shoes and stuffed in the leper the soft wool padding he'd formed. Not only would it soothe the boy's injured foot, but it would help keep him warm as well. In the blink of an eye, he put the shoes back and slipped away into the dark. The next morning, 12 days before Christmas, the second Yule lad arrived just as he did every year. His name was Gilliger, or Gollygawk. He would spend his Christmas visit sneaking around cow barns and stealing milk from the buckets. His head was nearly bald and always covered by a dirty red stocking cap, and he had a long white beard that trailed in the buckets and smelled like the barns. As he snuck into the village, he found his brother Sheepcoat Claude behind a huge haystack spying on the human boy. Gollygawk watched as the boy danced around, staring at the shoes on his feet. What an odd boy, he thought. He crept closer to Sheepcoat Claude and couldn't believe what he saw on his brother's face. It was almost as if he were smiling. But that couldn't be right. A troll never smiles. Brother Troll, Gollygawk whispered, what are you doing? Sheepcoat Claude turned guiltily and shook his head. I'm really not sure, he said. Then he told his brother the story of the little boy. He seemed so happy, all because of the leper. I think maybe it makes me a little happy too. Bah, what is happy? Gollygawk scoffed. We are trolls. There is no happy except from what we steal and the tricks we play on these silly humans. What else do we need? Ah, rumph, Sheepcoat Claude grunted. Perhaps. But if the leper I wove him makes him happy and keeps the secrets of our cave and treasures safe, it is a good thing. Yes, that is good, Gollygawk said. Just then the milkmaid came out of the barn, and Gollygawk couldn't help noticing that she'd left the door open. Leaving his brother, he snuck inside to guzzle down as much milk as he could. For the rest of the day, Gollygawk slithered from barn to barn, stealing as much milk as he could drink or carry. Once in a while he wondered about what his brother had said. Keeping their secrets was important. Maybe a small token left behind would be a good idea. As he thought about keeping their wonderful treasures safe, his hands worked quickly, braiding straw from the barn floor. The next morning the children in every house found Gollygawk's creation stuck inside their shoes. A straw pony for each little boy and a straw doll for each little girl. Not thinking this was strange at all, the children squealed with delight and happily played with their new toys. 11 days before Christmas, Stuffer, sometimes called Stubby because he was very short and could hide almost anywhere, arrived to join his brother trolls. Of all the places he could hide, Stuffer liked the kitchen the most. He loved all kinds of food and would hide in the kitchen corner and wait patiently until he could snatch a baking pan and snack on the crusty bits stuck to it. He kept his gray beard tied in a knot so that it wouldn't be in the way when he stuck his whole head in a pan. Icelandic Christmas cake, pepparkakor, which are pepper cookies, cream-filled bowler, he loved them all. After spending all day sneaking from house to house and stuffing himself with the leftovers stuck to the pans, Stuffer settled into a comfy pile of blankets in the dark corner where he thought about the stories his brother trolls had told him when he arrived. They all knew it was important to protect their treasure, but he'd seen something else in their eyes. Sheepcoat, Klatte, and Gollyguk seemed happy that the children had liked their gifts. How odd! He had never heard of his brothers or any troll being happy or giving gifts. Why would he want to give someone a gift? And even if he did, why would it make him happy? All Stuffer needed to be happy was a nice pile of unwashed baking pans. The more stuck on crispy bits, the better. He went outside wondering what gift he could give and saw a flock of puffins in the distance. He thought puffins looked like miniature penguins except for their wings and the bright orange of their feet and beaks. He would never admit it, but he loved those cute little birds. Then he remembered seeing the children show off their straw toys and how pleased Gollyguk had looked. As Stuffer wondered what that felt like, an idea came to him, and he almost smiled. That is, if a troll could smile. It couldn't hurt, he thought. Besides, he wouldn't do it to make anyone happy. He would do it to protect the troll's treasure. 10 days before Christmas, Thurslacker, in English is spoon licker, arrived in the village. Like his brother Stuffer, Spoon Licker loved food, but he was very lazy. Scraping pans clean would be too much work. He preferred to lick spoons, and that was much quicker and easier. A very sneaky troll, he would often steal the spoon right out of the pot, which would allow him to try all kinds of food. But since it was only a spoonful, he never got more than a taste of anything. As you might expect, he was the skinniest of the trolls, scruffy-looking with a long tongue, a wild beard, and stringy hair hanging over his pointed troll ears. His shifty eyes moved quickly, so he could find the right moment to rush in and steal his treats. This year he went from house to house collecting his spoons. Spoonlicker thought about what his three brother trolls had told him. Never before had they done anything for the humans and even paid them much attention. As for Spoonlicker, he thought only of their kitchens and the wonderful treats he tasted from the stolen spoons. But what if the villagers tried to keep the trolls from their Christmas visits? Well, would they hide their spoons? Thinking about the hundreds of spoons he'd stolen, Spoonlicker snuck into the barn and found a dark corner where he arranged his spoons in front of him. As he rubbed his fingers, little sparks of troll magic appeared, and he picked up the first spoon. In a matter of minutes, he crafted the spoon handle into the likeness of a horse. Nodding, he started working on the next spoon. Late that night, Spoonlicker snuck into the homes of all the children and left a small wooden carving carefully made from a stolen spoon in each pair of shoes. 9 days before Christmas, Potskyful or Potscraper joined his troll brothers. Now there were 5 trolls in the village and the surrounding farms. Potscraper was the least scary of the trolls and a funny sort of chap. He had chubby cheeks and a round little nose with a white fluffy beard sticking out from his jaw. Unlike most trolls, Potscraper didn't mind children and didn't try to scare them, although he did like to play pranks on them. He watched to see when a mother would make sweet treats, and before she could give the bowls to the children for them to lick, he'd go to the door and tap. He would use his troll magic to return to the kitchen quick as a wink. The children would all rush to see who had come for a visit, but when they opened the door, there would be no one there. While everyone was looking at the door, Potscraper would snatch the bowls, slurping and smacking his lips as he licked them clean. He had so much fun watching the children search for the missing bowls. This year, when his brother trolls shared what they had done, Potscraper thought to himself, what a fun trick to play. He would leave his surprise and, for a change, watch the children try to figure out where something had come from instead of where it had disappeared to. The next morning, children woke up to find candles in their shoes, and they whispered to each other as the growing group of Yule lads watched from their hiding places. Why had they received candles? Who had left them? Pot Scraper cackled and clapped his hands at their confusion. 8 days before Christmas, the worst of the trolls arrived. His name was Askaslacker, Bull Licker, who was smelly and dirty. He had no manners at all. He was even lazier than Spoon Licker. He would sneak from house to house and hide under the beds, waiting for a bowl to be put on the floor, filled with the table scraps for a cat or a dog. As quick as a wink, he'd snatch the bowl and pull it under the bed. When he heard from his brothers about what had happened this year, he didn't know what to make of it. As a troll, he had never thought of giving a gift. He pondered what each one had done, and how the children seemed to like the surprises they found every morning. He could do this too, he thought. But he'd never been one to do what he was told, and he always wanted to be different. He cared nothing for children and truly didn't notice them much. Yet every now and then the sad look on a dog's face as it stared at an empty bowl made him feel just a little guilty. He had watched as more than one hungry dog sniffed and pushed at a bowl that Bull Licker had licked clean. Maybe his brothers were right and he should get rid of that empty, sad feeling. Just maybe. The next morning the children woke up to find their shoes filled with sticks and bits of yarn. The gift not for the children, but for their pets. As the Yule lad trolls went off to their mischief, the children happily played with their dogs and cats and their new toys. Herthaskettler, or Door Slammer, was also a miserable and mean troll. His scrawny troll body was nearly covered by a long, dirty white beard that hung to the middle of his chest. With his squinty eyes, pointy nose, and toothy sneer, he had an evil look. Door Slammer loved chaos and hated quiet. He'd wait in the dark for quiet to come over a house after the villagers had gone to sleep, and then with an evil cackle, he'd sneak to a door and swing it back and forth to hear it squeak. Eek! Swook! Every squeak was different. Sometimes, though, he'd sneak into a house where all the door hinges were well oiled. They didn't squeak at all. Where was the fun in that? In those houses, Door Slammer would run from room to room, slamming open doors closed. Wham! Slam! Whomp! It was a terrible ruckus. Door Slammer had such fun with his pranks. No one slept well when he was around, at least not for long. Everyone moaned and groaned, and he was happy when they were grumpy. When he arrived 7 days before Christmas, he scoffed at his brothers. Gifts indeed! Happy children and puppy dogs wagging tails? Who ever heard of such a thing? What kind of trolls were they? But later, hiding in the shadows by himself, he watched as his 6 brothers spied on the villagers and their children, and he felt just a little bit lonely. His brothers looked pleased with themselves. Door Slammer spent the rest of the day going from house to house in search of someone he could bother. As he snuck in and out, he thought about his brothers and their stories of the past few days. He wasn't sure how he felt about giving gifts, but they were his brothers, and he didn't want to be alone. So he would do as they had done, and maybe, just maybe, he would find out why they all wore a little bit of a smile this year. Door Slammer thought hard about what he could do. Maybe it would be just a little nice for people to think of him when he wasn't there. Maybe it would be nice if, when they did think of him, they'd smile instead of groan. He didn't really think he'd feel better if he made someone smile, but it probably wouldn't hurt to try. The question was how. Door Slammer walked by himself, thinking as he kicked at the sticks on the ground. He missed the squeak squeak of the doors and the eek of the rusty hinge. Who wouldn't love that sound? Anyone would. That's it, he cried. I know what I can do. Door Slammer rushed around collecting small branches and twigs from the ground. Then, using his troll magic, he quickly whittled his way through the large pile. That night, as he snuck from house to house again, Slamming doors and squeaking hinges, he stopped at each pair of shoes he found and slid in a small whistle that would squeak and squawk just like a rusty door hinge. In the morning, door slammer couldn't hold back his grin as the air filled with the squeaks and squawks of the children's new whistles. He jumped up and down with glee while parents held their hands over their ears and shook their heads. For the rest of the day, he slammed doors with an extra happy thump. 6 days before Christmas, the 8th troll came to the village. Skirgammer, or Skirgobbler. He had a round face with a big nose and a chubby troll tummy. He hardly ever frowned, and he didn't play any awful tricks. But he followed, he always did, what his troll brothers told him without question. Skirgobbler spent most of his time stealing and eating as much skyr as he could. In Iceland, skyr is quite a treat. It's like yogurt, but much yummier. Skirgobbler would sneak into rooms where big wooden tubs of skyr were stored. And then he'd jump and pound on the lids until they broke, splattering splinters and skyr all over. He'd gobble down the skyr, slurping and smacking his lips till his tummy was bursting. And then he'd sit down and his raspy troll voice bleat, howl, and groan. On this day, as he sat in the storeroom moaning over his aching stomach, he didn't want to move, but his brothers had given him a job to do. Burping loudly, he grabbed the splinters of wood nearby and whipped out his knife. Not as talented as his brother Spoonlicker, Skirgobbler couldn't fashion toys, but he thought of Stuffer's puffin feather pens and how the children seemed to like them. Why, he told himself, I could make these splinters into pencils for them to draw with. And so he stuck his tongue out in concentration and settled down to whittling. The next morning, all 8 Yule lads watched as the children woke and eagerly checked their shoes. Skirgobbler stood by his brothers, anxious to see how the children liked his gifts. But there were no squeals of joy, no oohs or ahs, hearing only confused whispers. The eavesdropping trolls looked at each other, scowling. What ungrateful children. The warm feeling they'd felt over the last few days faded away. Their troll instincts kicked in. They all growled at each other, and quick as a wink, Stuffer snatched up one of the new gifts from a hay bale nearby. Turning it over in his gnarled hand, he examined it closely. Then he paused, as confused as the children had been. What was this that Skirgobbler had made? It was long and skinny and had a hole in the middle. It looked a bit like a pencil, but it was empty in the middle like a straw, and it was too skinny to be a straw. How odd, he said. His troll brothers walked over to examine it too, and looked at each other, puzzled. Skirgobbler, Stuffer said, what is this? Skirgobbler shuffled away, kicking the dirt with his scuffed shoes. It's a pencil to draw with, he mumbled, like the puffin feather pens. But it's hollow. How does it work? Skirgobbler slapped a meaty troll hand to his forehead. I forgot to add the troll magic to make them work, he cried. Embarrassed that his gifts were all wrong, he hung his head. His brothers patted his back awkwardly, not knowing what to say. As trolls, they were used to making messes and playing pranks, and didn't know very much about feelings. And now their brother troll was sad, and they didn't know what to do. 5 days before Christmas, Bukna Krieger, or Sausage Swiper, arrived in the village in the morning. He found the group of Yule lads standing in the shadows of the barn. With lots of growls and grunts and a few hanging heads, they explained what they had been up to. Sausage Swiper scowled. He was a sausage thief, that's what he did. He would climb up to the rafters of a dining room and wait to snatch sausage from the table below. What did he know about gifts or smiles or feelings? He noticed Skirgobbler looking a little sad and embarrassed. And even though Sausage Swiper was a troll, he didn't like to see his brother unhappy. He'd find a way to fix this, but first he needed to snag some sausage. He worked his way from house to house, leaving not a single sausage behind. Hours later, Sausage Swiper sat on a crossbeam and gobbled down his 10th sausage. It was so good. When he was done, he rubbed his sleeve against his greasy mouth and wiped his hands on his grimy vest. Feeling the gritty soot on his fingers, he got an idea. Nimbly, he swung down from the beam and went to find his brother trolls. After he whispered his idea to them, they all set off to collect Skyr Gobbler's flawed gifts, and before long they came back with big armfuls of not-quite pencils. Using the soot from the crossbeams and a little troll magic, Sausage Swiper stuffed each of the wooden tubes with charcoal. What fine pencils these would make now! His troll sneer turned up in a bit of a smile. How pleased Skyr Gobbler would be that the children would now treasure his gift. In the morning, Sausage Swiper and Skyr Gobbler stood with their arms around each other, holding back their grins as the children happily drew pictures with the new pencils they'd found in their shoes. Sausage Swiper didn't think about not having a gift of his own for the children. He'd done this for his brother, and that was enough. 4 days before Christmas, Gluggaguy, or Window Peeper, joined his brother trolls. Short and skinny and with very bad eyesight, he wore thick glasses and would stand on tiptoe to peek into windows, looking for gems and shiny trinkets and other treasures. Later, when everyone was fast asleep, he'd sneak into the houses and swipe whatever had caught his eye and add to his collection. When he greeted his brother trolls, he learned how the gift giving had started and what each of them had done for the children. Being a troll, Window Peeper could certainly understand the value of treasures. Each of his shiny gems had been swiped from someone's home. No one had ever given one to him freely. What would that be like, he wondered. The next morning the children found the stones he had left in their shoes. Some were dark, some were smooth, some were shiny, but all of them were unique, and all of them were treasures. As the children expressed their delight, Window Peeper discovered that freely giving a gift gave him a happy, warm feeling, and he sort of liked it. 3 days before Christmas, Joddathever, or Door Sniffer, the 11th Yule lad, arrived in the village. He found his brothers Stoofer and Spoonlicker hiding in the corners of an empty kitchen. Stoofer and Spoonlicker liked having Door Sniffer around because he had a huge sensitive nose. He always knew which house had the best food cooking and could smell fresh bread baking from across the valley. And he could run so fast that he could snag it before it even cooled. When he heard what his brothers had been doing this year, he joined in the gift giving, and the next morning every child had a bright new handkerchief. Whenever they sneezed, they would think about Door Sniffer and his oversized nose. 2 days before Christmas was St. Thorlock Day. It was also the day that Ketacroker, better known as Meat Hook, arrived. And when he did, he quickly joined Sausage Swiper in the crossbeams of a ceiling high above a meal table. As his brother told him all about the giving that had been going on, Meat Hook carefully leaned over with a long hook and snagged a huge chunk of roast. With good aim, he could even snatch meat straight from someone's plate. And he was so fast that no one had ever caught him doing it. None of the villagers ever had any idea that 2 Yule lads were hiding in the rafters above, snacking on meat and sausage. Mutton, roast, ribs, Meat Hook devoured it all. This year, after feasting, he used the leftover bones to fashion wonderful carvings, and in the morning each child awoke to find a small statue of Saint Thorlock made from bone. They danced around excitingly, holding tightly to their latest treasure. On Christmas Eve, Snicker, or Candlebeggar, arrived to complete the group of 13 Yule lads. For a troll, he was a happy little beast who loved bright candles. He liked how they looked when they sparkled, and he liked to make large piles of them. But most of all, he liked to eat them. He spent his days loafing and waiting for dusk, when he would seek out a twinkling flame of candle as the children played outside. In the blink of an eye, he'd blow a candle out and stuff it in his pack. When he grew hungry, he'd fish one out of the pack and have himself a snack. This year he listened carefully as his brother trolls told him that the humans were caring and giving, that they shared what they had and welcomed the gifts they'd received. As Candlebeggar looked around at his brothers, they seemed happy. They had each been given a chance to share something with someone else instead of taking, and they seemed to like it. As trolls, they'd always been selfish and petty, and they were happiest when playing pranks. But now they enjoyed making gifts and seeing the happiness they brought to others. Maybe all the years of visiting the village and seeing the Christmas celebrations had warmed their cold troll hearts. Suddenly, Candlebeggar realized something. While they might have been trolls by birth, they were and always would be the 13 Yule lads by choice. And they could choose to stop being mean and stop helping Grilla make her bad kid stew. They could still visit the villages at Christmas, and they could still play their troll tricks and have their troll fun, but they didn't have to be feared anymore. Candlebeggar snuck away quietly and searched the village homes carefully. He collected paper from each home and sat down with one of Stuffer's puffin feather pens. The next morning on Christmas Day, a scroll that contained a special greeting was found carefully wedged inside each child's shoe. The village was quiet as the scroll was unrolled and read in every home. 13 trolls known as Yule lads were here and learned about gifts and giving this year. We make a mess and cause quite a fuss, but really do wish you a Merry Christmas. And that's the last story for now. And happy holidays.